United States President Barack Obama delivered his annual State of the Union speech to the American public Tuesday night. In it, he laid out a plan for his midway year of his second term. The president touted what he said is an improving economy, but he battles poor approval ratings and divided Congress, which has often stymied his initiatives. VOA's Carolyn Presutti reports.
The president enters the ornate House chamber with handshakes and hugs for members of Congress. He aims his appeal beyond this room to the 30 million Americans watching at home.
Let's make this a year of action.
And as he had signaled, Mr. Obama said he would act to reverse the growing gap between the wealthy and those at the bottom of America's pay scale, raising the minimum wage of some connected to government and urging Congress to raise the pay of all at minimum wages.
This will help families. It'll give businesses customers with more money to spend. Say yes.
And the president turned to the efforts to create a pathway to citizenship for some who are in the country illegally and reform the U.S. immigration system.
Independent economists say immigration reform will grow our economy and shrink our deficits by almost $1 trillion in the next 2 decades.
Turning his attention overseas to Syria, Mr. Obama expressed support for those in the opposition not affiliated with terrorist networks. He pointed to diplomatic efforts to eliminate chemical weapons in Syria and to negotiations to keep Iran from building a nuclear bomb, crediting tough sanctions.
But let me be clear. If this Congress sends me a new sanctions bill now that threatens to derail these talks, I will veto it.
With most U.S. troops out of Afghanistan by year's end, the president says if the government signs a security agreement, a small force would remain to train Afghans and help pursue al-Qaeda.
For while our relationship with Afghanistan will change, one thing will not: our resolve that terrorists do not launch attacks against our country.
At home, the president battles an approval rating of 46%, down significantly in a year. And Congresswoman Cathy McMurris Rodgers, giving the Republican response, delivered a different way of balancing income inequality, less government.
We hope the president will join us in a year of real action by empowering people, not by making their lives harder with unprecedented spending, higher taxes, and fewer jobs.
From here, the president begins a 2-day 4-state tour to promote his initiatives. He'll continue his push for a minimum wage increase for all workers to, as he told Congress, give America a raise. In Washington.
Well, joining us now with more on President Obama's State of the Union address is VOA's Carolyn Presutti. We just filed that story. Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure, David.
How would you describe the momentum of President Obama's speech? Much anticipated, of course.
Well, I think what we saw was a frustrated president. He's in his second term, he's the middle of his second term, and very few of his initiatives have gotten through Congress. So he's at the point where he's saying, I'm going to go it alone. I'm going to do some executive orders and get some things done. So that's why he started to kickstart the minimum wage increase with some federal workers. He's starting a new government-issued IRA for Americans so that Americans can save more, invest more, and he said, I'm done. I'm just going to go forward.
Now, for a lot of the Americans, of course, they were listening for some of the points in some of the initiatives you just mentioned. Do you think that he made a good, strong statement about how he's going to make sure that they come around?
Well, it was a very domestic State of the Union address. He mentioned very few foreign issues. I mean, as you heard in my piece, he did mention Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, but he never mentioned Egypt. He never mentioned Ukraine. But the Americans needed to hear something about the economy, jobs, inequality, and he certainly delivered on that aspect.
Now, the point about the minimum wage and the Republican comeback to that particular issue, are you able to juxtapose the two?
You mean the Republican response?
Yes.
Given by a woman from Washington State, which is one of our western states, Cathy McMurris Rodgers. It was a very upbeat, very soft, very different response than the Republicans have had in the past. She was very folksy. You know, she was 44-year-old, just gave birth 8 weeks ago. And she did counter the president in 2 different areas. But her speech was really to give a face to the Republican Party, to show that the Republicans are like every other American. So I think her intent in that was a bit different than in the past.
And speaking about the Republicans, they are either already there or they're heading for a retreat. to discuss a very important issue, immigration reform.
Correct.
Give us a little bit background and why it's so important for them now.
This could be the year for that. The Republicans have shown that they are willing to talk about certain issues regarding immigration. So I think that's why the president brought it up last night. He said, let's go forward with immigration reform. And I think he sees an opening. So the Republicans are going to discuss that. They'll probably also discuss how they feel about the president going forward on his own. He may create some enemies, but then again, it is a midterm election this year. Usually it goes against the president who is in the White House, so we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
Carolyn Presutti, who joined us today here on Africa 54. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories that we cover. Please join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com.